How's it going, Mike?
Going great, Frank. Good to see you this week.
Same here.
I'm excited for this week's episode.
Yeah, me too. We're going to cover Gary Zukav's material, and Mike and I are going to give our perspective on how we see it, and obviously we're going to show clips of his perspective on how he looks at this world.
I love it. I love it. We got to start this episode by giving a quick shout out to one of our main guys, Mr. Dan Murphy. Dan Murphy, thank you so much for this recommendation. He reached out to us via email and said, hey guys, can you cover Gary's stuff? So Frank and I dove into him this last week, and thank you for the suggestion, Dan. Great idea bringing him up on the show. Frank, why don't you talk about The Seat of the Soul?
Yeah.
You were telling me you had read this book.
Yeah, I read it years ago because I've seen him. He's been on Oprah.
A shitload of times.
Yeah, like 30-something times. So,
yep.
Not that I didn't really watch Oprah a lot just because I was working.
But she had a lot of influence on like Barnes & Noble, in the 90s and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, it was called The Oprah Effect. And obviously I've heard this gentleman on here and I'm listening to him talking, so I got his book. So preparing for this show, I started to reread it. I didn't reread the whole thing, but I did read it. And it really, it helped me change my perspective on, like, there's different, like, ways of looking at life. And one way he's going to get in, we'll get into his work if we pull up clips. I'm not sure all the clips that we have. But he talks about the five-sensory human opposed to the multi-sensory human. Yep. And, through our five senses, say Newtonian physics, the way you look at the world is the way it happened, and you try to gather a story around that and try to justify it and understand it.
But I saw this, I felt this, I tasted this, so this is the experience I had.
And from the human mind, we're trying to make logic out of it, but you really can't because it's always forever changing, all right? So then you realize, okay, what else is out there? And when you get into this multi-sensory, another one might be intuition. What the thing about intuition is when you're working on your intuition and you have an impulse to go do something, you don't really know why. You trust it and you do it. So where in the five sensories, when you go to do something, you have to know why you're doing it. And that could actually slow down because you're only basing off your sensory experiences from your past. Mm-hmm. And so your past doesn't really relate to the changing the future because the present, what's create the past doesn't create the present. So just rest your mind on that one, try, but that's really how it happens because in the present moment we could talk about the past, but every moment is the present moment. So we start to work on these different sensories, like these unlimited ones, or you start to tap into these understandings of knowing without knowing how. It's one level. And when things start to work out, they're working out. You know it. Like when you come from a state of love and interacting with human beings, you get a loving response. Even if it starts out to be somewhat, disputable in the beginning, like you're fighting or arguing with someone. But once you enter love into the field, you start to see it change. The dance change, the dimension which you're in starts to change. So understand this. But people are like, well, how is offering love going to change a war, say, between the Palestinians and Israel? I'm like, well, if you had to know prior to doing it, you'll never experience it. It's just you have to trust in the system and the universe, how it operates. But trying to do what we did in the past to eradicate the fear and the harm that's going now won't do it. It will just have a different thing to fear, a different thing to see break down in front of us. It's a different time. But yet, the replication, to keep doing it this way, we obviously know it's not working. So we go into a different state of sensory, take out our five senses of what we're looking at, and go into more intuition and utilizing love. The solution will present itself, and we'll recognize it's working, but the mind can't wrap around its head how it's going to work. So if I just follow my bliss, well, how's your day going to work out? I'm like, I'll let you know at the end of the day how it worked out. So Gary gets really into this type of stuff, and that's why I was really attracted to his work. And again, thanks again, Dan, because this, like, we've been doing this for 4 years, and I'm always thinking, like, is there anybody else we could talk about? Mm-hmm. Like, I keep forgetting someone like Gary that I've known his material for a while, and but yeah, I'm short-sighted with that. That's why we have. It's why
Gary's coming on at the most opportune, perfect time.
Yes.
And that's how we like to look at it. Let's talk about a little about his background before we dive into any videos. So Gary wrote The Seed of the Soul. That was back in 1989. That was his second book. His first book was The Dancing Woolly Masters. He's a 4-time New York Times bestseller, consecutive books, which is really cool. Seed of the Soul, I feel like, was the one that really put him on the map. He was a Harvard graduate, which is what I thought was very interesting, and I wanted to mention that and bring that up because a lot of times when we dive into these type of topics and stuff, people write them off as woo-woo or but more and more you see these different PhDs, these doctors, these different people with highly valued backgrounds, a Harvard graduate, a Stanford graduate, all these different types of things. And it's like, okay, there's some substance here, Why is this Harvard graduate, diving so deep into these topics, or quantum physics? Because that was also something that Gary was, a fan of or stumbled upon in a bookstore, was the quantum physics side of things. He was a U.S. Army Green Beret, fought in Vietnam. I thought that was pretty interesting. This just kind of gives you a little well-rounded view of him. One other thing I thought was interesting, after the war, he came back, he moved to Northern California. He started getting into kind of like the whole like sex, drugs, rock and roll type of stuff. He was
good times.
Yeah, good times. And he talks about how he was, a sex addict, he was addicted to drugs. And he talks about addiction in a lot of his content too, which is extremely interesting because whether we like it to admit it or not, every single one of us suffers from some type of an addiction. We just certain addictions, such as like caffeine, sugar, television, all these things seem as normal and, everyone just does that, etc. But addiction is something that is part of everyone's life. And when you can look at what is coming up in an addiction and take that multidimensionality, approach, you can learn a lot about yourself. So it's not just, drugs, alcohol, sex that you can be addicted to. And so I thought that was very cool. Yeah.
Addiction comes from actually utilizing the outside world to fix the state of being. All right. So in other words, if you constantly choose to have alcohol or caffeine to see the experience, it's different. So but a lot of people are, like Mike said, are doing it like, I feel tired, so let me drink something outside of me, such as caffeine. And that really is where the addiction comes from. It becomes habitual. And, in the end, it doesn't work. Like, why are you tired? Is the question you should be asking. Yes, if you're tired and need to function something, drinking the caffeine at the moment will change that. But then it slowly diminishes as well, because when you take caffeine, it suppresses these parts in our body that eat up the tired chemical, if you will, and then eventually once it suppresses that and the caffeine wears off, all of a sudden you feel more tired than ever. And
the crash.
Yeah, so if you're starting to do that, that's what we call an addiction. Where if you're taking caffeine to see, let me see what happens, like, whatever. So there's a distinction there.
Yep.
It's not, again, getting back to chopping the wood and gathering the water.
And I feel like that applies to everything: drugs, alcohol, sex, all the above.
Everything. But like I'm living a specific life. I'm choosing to live. It's not the best life. It's the best life for me. Where a lot of those things, I don't think about taking those. Why? Because I've experienced those, and however you want to look at it, I'm like, they don't serve the purpose at this moment in my life right now. So I don't choose to do them. Why? I only have so much time, so to speak, to choose the things I enjoy doing. So, but I'm not here to knock it either, because sometimes choosing that can show you something about yourself as well.
And I think that's the most important thing is don't beat yourself over the head over these types of things. Don't label yourself an addict. Don't, all of this. These things are gifts on a deeper level for you to learn more about yourself.
Yes.
That's the point of this.
Yeah, and that's when we get into the multi-sensories of the humans, where you start to look at it differently, not to knock it. Just like every character a particular actor or actress had played, they wouldn't want to go through their Rolodex of movies they played in and say, I didn't like that one, I like this one. Because at the end, they're like, I like them all. differently, but I liked them all because you come to an understanding. It's like, it was the craft, you know. It was the moment in which I was in the craft that actually granted it, not necessarily the outcome. The outcome showed how steadfast I was in the craft. So you really start to appreciate even the times that you didn't do well. And that's a whole nother way of looking at life. And when you get to these multi-sensories, you actually start to see things for what they are, and you don't knock it.
You allow yourself to experience it.
Yeah. It's like seeing a guy on the street homeless, like there's something wrong with that. I'm like, is there? I don't know. I'm not pretending to try to know because my mind can't conceive it based on where I'm at. Would I be able to live on the street? I'm like, well, that's not the role I'm playing through this persona. But nonetheless, I wish that person well, but, you know, maybe they chose to come here through a soul contract and they're fulfilling it, you know. But I only know my soul contract. So if I'm an actor on a set, I'm not trying to ridicule the other actors as I'm acting, because I won't really act that well now, will I? Like, let the director deal with the other actors. I'll just do my role, and when it's directed towards me, I go into it.
Well, when we start to live from a place like that, that's when community, you know, and this multifaceted organism that we all are starts to really move in tandem and work together. Yeah. You know?
And that you can lay your hat on, so to speak, but you just don't know until it happens.
Mm-hmm. And that knowing and that trust in the universe and these concepts we're talking about, these aren't five sensory type of things. And that's what Gary's really diving into here, which is, hey, there is a whole world beyond these five senses that we want you to be able to tap into.
But the five senses do recognize if it's working or not.
Absolutely.
They just can't predict how it's going to work. They're just here to let you know it's working, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really how it happens. And we start to change our perspective on what's happening in the outside world. And all of a sudden it's like, man, this is all good. Yeah, as human beings and the characters, the personas we choose, there might be a perceived or a preferential way of living. Okay, yeah, it's true. But you can't knock the other ones, where a lot of us, and I've done this, where I'll knock a lot of stuff. And I went one day thinking, like, why I wasted all this energy knocking things that are never really going to happen for me. Like, I'll watch a TV show or some behavior or somebody's acting, and I'm like, that has nothing to do with me unless I involve myself in making an opinion on it. But I'm like, okay, I could have been moving in the direction of which my bliss would want to take me, other than getting distracted by something that doesn't have anything to do with me in the moment. Now, if it does, I'll deal with it then. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I can't perceive what's going to happen. Yeah. I could just sit there, and when something happens, I could stay in the present moment and simply deal with it and look at it as excitement rather than horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you start living from a place like that, your experience changes immensely.
Yeah, and also I notice a lot more people that I talk to are getting into these multi-sensories
states.
Yeah, and I will talk to them, and sometimes I have to remind it, and sometimes I remind them, I'm like, you're already doing it. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, yeah, like it's already happening. It's just that we're trying to logically, like, figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, you got to suspend that for a little bit. Mm-hmm. There is a higher logic to this. It's not like illogical stuff. Because when you do this, like when you trust your intuition, and all of a sudden you start to see things unfold in a more preferential, fluid way where it's benefiting you and others around you, you realize, oh my God, because I allowed myself to trust my higher mind, it led me to the place in which I wanted to go. Perhaps differently, the place I want to go looks different, but nonetheless, it's the experience in which I wanted. Where if I had to figure everything out before I left my house, I would never leave my house because it's too overwhelming. All these possibilities that could happen and go wrong is why people become stuck in their homes, so to speak, and don't want to expand, and they're trying to make everything right. And if that doesn't agree with them, they have to go on and knock it. And I'm like, yeah, that's one way of living.
It's tiring.
Yeah, it is.
It's tiring.
Yeah.
I said we play our first clip by Mr. Gary Zukav.
Here we go.
Whenever you interact with anyone, whenever you encounter a circumstance, you enter an illusion. You enter, let me put it this way, you enter a learning dynamic. And this learning dynamic is continual. The illusion is a part of this learning dynamic. The illusion creates for you, like a moving picture, the experiences and circumstances that your soul needs in order to evolve and in order for you to move into your full potential. This living movie that is always going on in your life is the illusion. The content of your illusion is created by your intentions. That's why the illusion is alive at each moment with exactly what is appropriate and necessary for you and for your soul. You will not and you cannot experience one interaction or event in the Earth School that does not serve directly and appropriately the need of your soul to evolve. Wow, that's the illusion. The illusion is shaped by the dynamics of the soul initially. The karma of your soul shaped or configured your personality with its neonatal intentions, put it that way. The intentions that were to create your experiences in the Earth School. Your intentions, when they come from fear, generate and sustain the illusion. It is an illusion because all that exists between souls is love. The illusion is that you have an adversary. The illusion is that you're being betrayed. The illusion is that you're being exploited. The illusion is that you are angry, you are jealous, you are resentful, you are feeling superior or inferior, you are in a depression. There are myriad forms of fear. All of these emotions follow fear, and the intentions that follow fear shape your experiences in the Earth School. That is the illusion.
Yeah, well said.
I like that clip because he really clearly defines, in this spiritual community, you hear a lot about like, everything is an illusion. If I could move fast enough, I could put my hand through this hand, because we're just vibrating, pieces of information, we're dust in the wind, all this. But his take here is the reason I chose this clip, and I loved it because he's explaining the content of your life is your intention. And he explains that every experience that we're having, as real as we may be experiencing it, is actually needed for us to evolve. And so he the idea that I'm being hurt in this experience, even though you are being hurt, in whatever that specific situation is an illusion to bring you closer to home, to understand and to see, and learn about yourself and evolve. And I thought that he just knocked it out of the park with this.
Yeah, because whenever you're searching for something outside of you to satisfy and explain the world, you can go so far out, and then it starts to elude you, and that's what it is. So the understanding of illusion is every time you search the universe, it expands. It seems to expand in that aspect, but what's really happening is nothing ever remains the same, except for the viewer or the witnesser inside. And even though he doesn't mention here, it is a non-duality life we're living. I'm experiencing it like watching it. So like when I watch a TV show, what's the reality in it? Well, I'm watching nothing but modulating pixels on a screen. But in one day, I could put 5 movies on, so to speak, if I had nothing to do and my wife is out of town. But the screen itself is allowing the modulation of the pixels to enhance itself so I can visually see it through my senses of hearing and seeing, all the other type of stuff. But yeah, what was it? It was nothing, because once it turns off, the screen is the same. The screen never changed. So we start to realize we can experience something which is real, but what is it that we're experiencing? That's the illusion. Doesn't mean it's not happening, but what actually is happening? So if this is really not happening, why am I choosing to be upset about it? Mm-hmm. Why am I, And again, this is a walk backwards or going closer in, so it can be a process of going in. So why would you get upset at this? Especially if your intention is the soul to grow. Like, what's happening? Why is this doing this? I'm like, well, if I wanted to grow my muscles and I go to the gym and, my trainer says, okay, grab the 70-pound dumbbells. I'm like, why the hell would I do that? Mm-hmm. Well, you want to grow. And it's like, no, can I just sit there?
I want to grow without any any stress or struggle or pain.
Yeah. But after grabbing the weights and trying a couple of times, after a while, it becomes, I'm used to it. So I'm able to lift it. And then it's like, okay, next time now let's grab the 80s and keep going up from there, so to speak, to a moment in time in which you want to do.
I don't think I could even lift an 80-pound dumbbell.
Well, it's not necessary. It's set on attention. What's my intention? All right. Now, again, now my intentions aren't to get somewhere, because there's nowhere to get to. My intention is to experience stuff. So can I experience discomfort and not label it discomfort? Yeah. I'm like, okay, let me do that. Like, why is it being, so now when I put myself in a physical place that's I'm not used to, I consider that to be uncomfortable. Well, all of a sudden I actually start to enjoy it. So it's no longer I'm comfortable with the uncomfortable. So that helps change my possibilities. It takes the limits away of doing stuff. But is it really necessary? And the answer is no, it's not. But my intention in coming to Earth, my intention was to deal with limitations to its best without them bothering me, because there's something in us. It's like when Superman took his superpowers away. He understood prior to taking them away, he was able to fly and do a lot of things that the everyday human couldn't do. But he chose to take them away so he can be with Lois Lane. Now, he didn't forget that he could fly. He just realized, when he went to go jump in a phone booth, he's like, that's not going to work anymore. Mm-hmm. I got to figure this shit out without the phone booth, without the cape, whatever like that. So I have to do it with the limitations. And that's kind of why we came here. Well, can we get back to the point where we can start to fly? And I'm like, yeah, if it's part and parcel of your experience. Again, I'm not here to say that you're supposed to be stuck in this dense thing called gravity and you can only lift that. I'm like, as you start using our multiple understandings of sensories, not just the 5, but we go beyond that, all these things start to loosen up. Mm-hmm. Like gravity doesn't have that much of a force on you. It's not that you're going to start floating necessarily. It doesn't bother me. Like, struggles are now challenges. You start to define things differently from a different level. So that's when you start using these outer sensories, all of a sudden it's more like interesting rather than this is good or this is bad. I'm like, you get out of that duality world and see if you, and it's presented, and then you look at it and like, wow, this is interesting. Let's keep going.
Yeah. Things are not as concrete as we, imagine them to be. And that's something I've learned early on in my journey, how we perceive a situation like this will never work out, or, hey, this is working out exactly like it needs to. Deliver two totally different types of experiences, or as Gary called them, illusions. Yeah. These experiences we're having, the real experiences, you're meeting this person, you're getting hurt by this person, you're sharing this relationship, you're having that. But that is an illusion in the sense that it is the physicality of it is not there. There is nothing physical about it. It's fleeting. That moment is gone. That feeling you had, that feeling was specific to you and your genetic makeup and your experience of things and how you view things. It's not a concrete black and white fact like we state them to be. And so it's like learning to that this world is more malleable than we think it is.
Yeah, definitely. Everything transforms. Yeah, energy doesn't disappear. It just keeps transforming. So, and we know that, like, where is my 18-year-old body? It's certainly not here. But there's something in me that's looking outside these eyes, so to speak, that is always been. It's just, and that's why we're always looking for the Big Bang Theory and where did it all start. I'm like, well, the observation of consciousness in of itself is everything, so to speak, and that's how I explain it, or the God particle where everything exists. Nothing can move faster because that's all there is. But then there was a point where we became conscious in these physical bodies. So from that point, we started recording our experience and understanding and think, okay, when did my life start, right? Born in 1967. So did it start there? I'm like, well, I don't remember 1967. I could go back and watch articles that people wrote down about the times and stuff like that. And depending on who I talk to, I'm going to get a different output on how to look about it. But nonetheless, when did my memories really start to stick? I mean, it was probably, I remember having a memory around 2 years old. But yeah, they came a little bit later. And even the ones that I started to remember, I'm like, I forgot half those anyway, if not most of them.
I'm surprised you remember it too. I think the earliest memory I have is like maybe like 6 or 7 or 8.
Yeah, I had a very early experience, and I
cool.
Clearly still remember it. It was actually my birthday.
That's cool.
And I was in the apartment. I was living in Bayside, Queens at the time. And I remember just crawling up. My mom put a cake out in front of me. I put my hand in it.
Oh, that's so funny.
And
I remember putting your hand in it.
Yeah, I just remember the adults like they were kind of laughing, but like at the same time like startled, like, yeah, no one could eat the damn cake now because some 2-year-old stuck his hand in it. And all the adults like, hand. God damn, I want that cake. The kid just rubbed his nose and stuck in the cake. Yeah. So I ate the whole thing myself.
Yeah.
But I don't even remember eating the cake. Yeah, but it was just that moment.
That's cool that you remember that.
Yeah, so
I love stuff like that.
Well, I don't like why did I remember it? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. You don't, but I mean, who knows? Maybe later on you will.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah, I still stick my hand in my cake when.
Still to this day.
Yeah, I rub my nose and stick a hand in it. I'm like, oh, sorry. That's how you get the cake for yourself, by the
way. I love it.
Yeah.
What's our next clip?
All right, let's take this one here.
Our evolution, until very recently, has been as five-sensory humans, evolving through the exploration of physical reality. That's the same thing as the pursuit of external power. Now we have crossed a threshold. We are in new territory, brand new domain. We are now becoming multisensory. That means we are no longer confined to the five senses. Now, I use these terms because the five senses together form a single sensory system, and the object of that sensory system is physical reality. That's what it's designed to detect.
Yes.
As we become multisensory, we move beyond the limitations of the five senses. And we now are evolving through a different mechanism than the exploration of physical reality. We are evolving through responsible choice with the assistance and guidance of non-physical guides and teachers.
That's a very profound statement, and one of the handles that I get on it is the idea that something is happening right now in our age that's of significance here. It's not as if, one might say, well, we've always had access to these multi-sensory modalities, but something's happening now.
Indeed it is, as we speak. At this very moment and for all of the moments to come, it is happening now. We are in the most significant evolutionary transition our species has ever encountered. There is no way to compare what we are now experiencing with anything in our past. This new event has no historical antecedent. The only event in the history of our species that compares with this one is Genesis. And this is a new kind of Genesis. The genesis of our species into conscious awareness and participation in a larger fabric of life, in non-physical reality.
In other words, if we look at evolution, we're beginning to understand ourselves in terms of our spiritual evolution and not just our ability to have dominion over the other kingdoms of nature.
Exactly. Exactly. We have always been involved in spiritual evolution. We are spiritual beings. We have always been spiritual beings, and we will always be spiritual beings. The difference is that now we are becoming aware of ourselves as spiritual beings, and that is making all the difference.
Great.
Yeah, and
I like this clip for two reasons.
yeah, and also too, I don't know when this clip was shot.
This has to be early 90s.
All right, yeah. So, and you could definitely sense, from my experience and the people I run into, and even like TV shows that are presenting these types of concepts, if you will, and trying to utilize our five senses to experience these concepts. Although these things have been around for millennia, it's just that perhaps we had to go through different type of themes throughout our life to get to this point here, which there's nothing wrong with that. I remember hearing one time somebody said that us humans should be further along than we are here. And I'm like,
Says who?
It says who? And it's funny because it's still in the concept of thinking I know better than you and the outward power. And it's kind of weird to have that. Like I only know things based on in front of me, based on the character I'm playing and my experience. But even that, I don't really know what's happening. Like, why is there gravity? One could express like how gravity works, and we're actually starting to change the way we look at that too, because we went from Newton to Einstein's theory, and now there's other concepts talking about anti-gravitational forces and stuff like that. So again, I'm not a scientist, but over time, those concepts and how we explain it even change. No, it's not quite the way you think it is. And I'm like, wow, it's just being aware of that keeps us open to expanding rather than trying to lock down a way of doing it. In the aspect of locking it down is really where we are commiserate, and life just doesn't seem to be working out. Why? Because we're holding on to something that's keeping us down rather than letting go and floating up. Yeah. And someone like Gary comes along, which like having the accolades of going to Harvard and has a PhD and stuff, and then but he's not actually expanding upon what he maybe perhaps learned at Harvard and went beyond that, gives him validity to listen to. Where if I was just to say it, unless you knew me and had experiences through me, or it piqued something, that's where, like Mike said, it's pretty cool that he went to Harvard based on how we look at that was a higher source of learning. But even then, there was a ceiling to the understanding, and he's taken it even further and explaining it differently. So you don't have to go to Harvard. I'm not saying don't go to Harvard, but we shouldn't knock going or not going. Yeah, exactly. And
what's the experience you want to have?
And what I encourage people to do is don't take anyone's word for it, not even Gary's, and certainly not Mike and I, but go and contemplate this and experience it and see how it works for you. Like, I'm not going to convince you something is good. And then ask yourself, why don't I like this? Or why don't I get this? I'm like, well, have you played with it for a little bit? Have you contemplated it? Have you opened up to it? All right? And then see what happens. See what...
And keep in mind, anytime you're trying to be convinced of something, there's usually an agenda behind that.
Yeah, it's called a cult.
Why am I trying to be convinced of this or that it's this way or that way? And it usually boils down to, a sense of control, a sense of power, some sort of, a way to obtain more money, all of these things. You got to take a step back and ask yourself, What do I have to gain? What do I have to lose? Look, be your own skeptic.
Yeah, and teachers like Gary will sit there and present like a format or an outline, but he doesn't tell you specifically how to enact it.
Because there is no specific.
No, but
there's infinite ways it can happen.
But the portrayal of the character you're playing will have a specific in the moment. It won't last, but so I may do things specifically at this moment, and they keep changing. But it does. His isn't negating the way I'm doing it. It's enhancing it. Let me know, hey, this is part of the experience. Mm-hmm. Where It's like someone talking about how to make films, but not telling you what kind of film to make. That's up to you. And there isn't a wrong film to make, whether it's a horror, drama, comedy, what have you. But you have to understand how the whole production works. And if you do that, whether it's a comedy, drama, or a horror, you're going to do really good at it. If you only understand the structure of it, doesn't matter how good the story may be, it's not going to come across and play out right, whether it's a comedy, drama, or horror. So teachers out there like Gary are teaching us the formula of looking beyond the five senses and tapping into these multi-senses. And it's naturally happening, though. It's not like, what work do I have to do? I'm like, there's very little work to do. You just have to let go of thinking the five senses are telling you the absolute empirical truth, because they're not. You know, if you think about, we can see color in the frequency rays from red to violet and everything in between. Are there not frequencies on either side of that? Well,
No, we know for a fact that there are.
Yeah, but, well, we know
They're
based
just not
on instruments
visibly.
teaching us and stuff like that, conceptually, right? But yet right now, red to violet is all my sensories can see, but I also know there's something else out there. That being said, I'm like, if red and violet's all I can see, that's appropriate for my life. But how I look at that, if I start looking like red is a very low, dense color, and every time I see red, I get upset. I'm like, good luck driving down the street with a stop sign, you know? So red might be a lower frequency than violet, but I don't judge red. Red is beautiful, and, you know, it's just that we can see it more as humans, and that's the logic we say why we have stop signs that are red rather than violet. Maybe we just blow through a violet one. I don't know. You wouldn't see it.
But it's funny how that works.
Yeah, and and think about it like this: there will be a time where we become really intuitive, where we won't need a stop sign and a red light. That being said, I don't need the world to get there. Like, that's not my goal. Is to get. Why can't we get to a place where everyone gets along? I'm like, well, I don't think that's the goal. But paradoxically, if you start enacting it, you'll notice the people around you get along. Yeah, I'm aware that people don't get along, but maybe that's part and parcel of their story to come to a far gone conclusion. Like, well, that doesn't work. Yeah, it's how things play out. You know, so yeah, examine these things for yourself and really contemplate them. You know, go as far as you can. You know, don't hurt yourself. But
I liked what he was saying in the beginning. He said the object of the sensory system is this physical reality. And that helps you kind of get like a good gauge on what this experience is, which is, hey, look, there's this experience, you know, that I can taste, touch, smell, hear, you know, all the above, you know, the five sensory experiences that he's talking about. But then there's this whole other world beyond this, this non-physical type of experience. And so when he talks about how like our sensory system is the physical reality, it's like, okay, then what would I need to access the non-physical aspects of myself? And then that's where you learn to go within. That's where you learn, okay, it has nothing to do with what I see, smell, taste, touch, you know, hear type of thing. But, you know, how am I feeling? Where am I setting my attention? You know, what is the experience? What's coming to to me? Like, what is this experience that I'm having, you know, inside? And this kind of helps you to navigate the non-physical realms, if you will, because you realize that this physical experience is governed by our five senses. So when you're like, oh yeah, I don't like, you know, how this, what I saw here, I don't like what I heard here or whatever, you can revert back and say, okay, why? You know, and kind of go within, see that for the illusion, like in the first video that we were talking about, and say, what am I supposed to learn from this experience or this illusion? What is this teaching me about myself? Why didn't I like this experience? Or why did I love this experience? You know, and then from there, you're evolving, you're learning about yourself. And so I thought that was really cool about the video. Then the second thing I liked that he said was how everything is happening now. And he says that we're now experiencing this evolution of consciousness and awareness. So this video clip was from, early 90s or something like that. Here we are in 2024, roughly, let's just say 30 years after this video. And we all, I think, can agree that we are seeing consciousness, awareness, this type of discussion content more and more prevalent in our media, social media, conversations with friends and family. It's becoming more accepted. These ideas are less and less woo-woo and more, hey, there's neuroscience that backs this up. And shit, he was saying that 30 years ago, and look at where we were at today, much further down the line. But he's essentially having this conversation with the gentleman who's interviewing him, saying, hey, look, we're on like this precipice of something happening. I feel like we've always been there. We've always been there. And that's what I wanted to kind of get to.
We are, because when you look at time, even now, it's like, why can I make a statement that more people are doing this? Because I'm already at the state where the party was always existing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
it's always been
like,
here.
What is water? Is water a solid,
hydrogen,
a liquid, or is it a gas?
All of the above.
Well, at different states, it has its own. So yeah. So if I'm talking about ice, I'm talking about one state of water, and there's different, obviously, levels of ice and stuff like that. But if I forget that water has multiple states to it and can turn into a gas and simply disappear before my eye, but where does it really go? It doesn't disappear. It transforms somewhere else. When you start to understand that, it's letting you know that you're the one shifting into a different dimension, a different state, to see these things that have always been here. 30 years ago is a concept, but nonetheless, everything that Gary talks about, if he said this 30 years ago, is happening now. Everything is now. Everything is now. It's just that I could go into different states now, And when I do that, and that's kind of the multi-dimensional world that we talk about, or different stuff. It's like, it's not that you're going to switch into something. You change the way you perceive things, and everything changes. But I can experience ice and steam in the same day, so to speak, in that moment. It exists now. But if I'm, boiling water at night and the steam's coming out, I'm doing that. But if it's a hot summer day, I want ice in my drink. One isn't better than the other. It's useful, if I go into a sauna or a steam room opposed to a cold plunge. There's reasons I'm utilizing that. One isn't better than the other, because if my whole idea was to get to the place where everything was steam, it'd be a very interesting experience now, wouldn't it? So no, yeah,
that's a good analogy, because that is kind of what we're doing.
Yeah,
I only want to experience ice.
Experience steam.
I only want to experience steam. I only want to experience running water.
No, and going playing with all the different states that humans are existing in, and seeing where we can go with these states. That's the most amazing thing. I don't know. I have no idea. Is there another level? I'm like, perhaps there is. And people are like, well, we better get there because we won't survive. And I'm like, the funny thing about the conversation of annihilation is, how can we have that? Mm-hmm. I contemplate this. Just don't take my word for it. But have we ever experienced annihilation? If we did, me and Mike wouldn't be having this podcast and other people listening, because in annihilation, everything is annihilated. Mm-hmm. There's been shifts, and people like it now. It's over like, well, what about the dinosaurs? I'm like, did you ever see a bird? Actually, I just heard this. Someone said this years ago, and I'm like, you ever see an alligator? I'm like, don't tell me that's not prehistoric.
Seriously,
like that thing. But they were saying like all birds are descendants, or descendants of the dinosaurs.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, maybe they were, as the comet or the meteor hit the planet, they were flying. So it's like, if an earthquake hit and you're in an airplane, are you affected by the earthquake? And the answer is no, unless you had to land in the airport where it's just breaking up. You might have to circle around. So yeah, there are still dinosaurs from that. There aren't any really big ones. Maybe the story goes, we don't really need big ones. Tough to build a freeway and have big dinosaurs step on it. I'm like, yeah, that'd be problematic for us.
Ruin that shit for us.
And that's coming from my small part of my brain that has to make the story of why there aren't dinosaurs. Again, it's fine. It's play. It's like me and my buddies and kids who were into baseball. And I would, I would fight over what the best player I thought was, and I was almost getting like the fist fights with my buddies over this stuff, you know, and because I walked away and I'm like, okay, you can think you're right, but I'm right.
Isn't it funny how we do that?
Yeah.
But we take that all the way into life, and we do that with our bosses, our coworkers, our spouses, our relationships, our friends, all over the place.
But I'm not by any means, because this is where it gets messed up. I'm not by any means taking away the structure of how we live as a community either. I'm not saying get all the rules. If you take the rules away from football, there is no game. So there's a place where we have to come, like say like every year. We come to table, and like in scientists is come to table. Okay, what have we experienced? Does quantum theory and the double slit experiment, does it still hold sound? Like, yeah, we haven't found anything different. Like, okay, let's keep expanding on that model. Because into the turn of in the early 1900s, in the early the 20th century, it came in there. Where prior to that, we thought Newtonian physics was it, and then like, this quantum physics thing came in. It doesn't necessarily negate. Just like steam doesn't negate ice, it's just the water that you're experiencing is steam. But when it slows down and in its frequency, it turns into ice again. So, because once water turns into steam, it doesn't mean it cannot turn into ice. That's, can keep doing that over and over. But really, just sit there and like, wow, like, I only know the moment in which I'm in. And what I speak, that will start to alter. That's why it's very difficult to tell the history of empirical truth. Like there are empirical truths and facts, but there's only, the way I look at it, 5 of them. Me and Mike have mentioned this before in the podcast. But everything else is just an expression of how I'm experiencing within those 5 ones, such as we exist. Now is the only time. The one is the all the one. What you put out is what you get back, and change is the only constant. How am I experiencing that is my truth in the moment in which I'm in. But it doesn't negate somebody else's truth, and I think that's what it is. But yet, if I'm creating a game like the world here, there has to be some continuity in order to survive this game. So I get that, where we have to do that and not rip the whole game apart, but just add stuff and get rid of stuff. Like in the game of football over its year, I don't know, I keep talking about football, but over its time, there were rules and regulations that are no longer existing, and there's ones that are here now based on where we are. So back in the day, they wore leather helmets. Now they have like really sophisticated helmets compared to the leather one, and certain rules have changed over time based on where we are. So that's why trying to go back and like, football was better back in the day. I'm like, why? Because you played it back then. It might be a great memory for you, and you hold value to it, but you can't argue it's better. You can't argue it's better now either. It's at a greater level of things. If you measure certain things, right? So like steam is at a higher frequency than ice would be, but is it better? It depends if you want to take a cold plunge or a steam bath, come on. So,
what mood are you in?
Yeah, but to argue that it's vibrating a higher frequency, I'm like, that's no argument. Steam is greater than ice in that understanding of measurement, but it's not better. Yeah.
Well said. I like that. Let's jump into this clip. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, here we go.
The soul is the soul. It evolves, but it's our evolution and my evolution that I focus on. But yes, the soul is that part of us that existed before we were born and will continue to exist after we die. It's that part of us that is immortal. And it's that part of us that has the intentions of harmony and cooperation and sharing and reverence for life.
Yes. I remember at the time you described it as the mothership.
That's right.
Yes. And you used the diagram of the ship.
The soul is your mothership. So when you're sailing in the same direction that it wants to go, your life fills with meaning and purpose. And when you sail in another direction, it empties of meaning and purpose. You could look at it this way. You are a personality. That means you were born on a certain day and you'll die on a certain day. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But your soul won't die. Your soul is you also. We're on a journey to the soul, you could put it that way, while we're here in this span between birth and death. Think of yourself as a body in a soul. And while we have this precious opportunity to walk on the earth, the question becomes, what will we do with this personality? What will you do with you? Now here we can define you in a couple of ways. One is you with a little y, the personality that was born and that will die. The other you is the you with a big Y. That's your soul. And if you use your time while you're on the earth to align the little you with the big you, your life begins to fill with meaning, fill with purpose, fill with joy. And you know why you're alive. Following what you know your soul wants you to do.
One of the things that impressed me the most, it really just, I think, stayed with me forever, is on page 31 when you say, when the personality comes fully to serve the energy of the soul, that is authentic power. And this is a relatively new copy of Seat of the Soul. My copy by my bedside is so dog-eared, and I started highlighting it, and then I realized the whole book is highlighted, so what's the point of highlighting anymore? But that was one of the first things I highlighted in that book 13 years ago, and that awakened a spark of knowing in me that I never knew existed. I mean, I now call them aha moments, but I realized, when my personality comes to fully align with the energy of my soul, and I allow my soul to be the guide, that is when I am the most powerful. That is when I am in what I call now my sweet spot. My sweet spot.
You were born to live in the sweet spot. That is the creation of authentic power.
Yes.
And that's how we're all evolving now.
That everybody was born to live in the sweet spot.
Yes. There's been a huge change in human consciousness that has occurred. And its ramifications are going to be felt, and the experience of it is going to be felt by everyone.
You think so?
Yes, I do. What I'm talking about is this. I'm talking about an expansion of your perception beyond the five senses, beyond what you can see and taste and touch and hear and smell. As people become multisensory, they begin to become aware, to sense in some way that there is a big Y.
A big Y.
A big Y, a mothership.
I like that conversation.
Me too.
Actually, to tell you the truth, that's the first time I listened to that conversation.
Really?
Yeah, I just pulled it up.
Well, it was a perfect
I like
segment.
to do things blind a lot of times. Yeah.
Well, it was a good segment, and I'm glad that we chose one from Oprah, just because she did play a huge role, in getting his message out there.
Yeah, it's called the Oprah effect.
Yeah, and so it's cool to see that, and it's like, I love what he's talking about here, because this is at the crux of all of his content, which is like here I have it written down. It's essentially your authentic power. And what he's talking about is it's the alignment of the personality with the soul. And here in this clip, he talks about it as the mothership, is what he refers to it as. The mothership is the soul. When you're traveling in the right direction, it's going to feel on track, all that. And as you begin to travel in a different direction, you'll know, and it's not going to feel on track, Yeah,
exactly. And so both experiences are learned, or experiences equal to each other. It's just one is congruent patterns and the other one is interference patterns, and that's the whole experience. How we started out is his focus is not on the soul, it's on his experience and connecting to the soul. And that's the viewpoint I want to bring up that came to me. There's a couple of points that came to me. Listen to this just now. And one of them is, let's say the game of baseball. It's very interesting, and I think it's the only, maybe cricket, I'm not sure, I don't know the rules of cricket, but baseball, of all the games out there, and I could be wrong, but the object of the game is to start home and to make it home.
Hell yeah.
So there isn't a time value on it. There's innings, obviously, but so one would say if the object is to get home, why leave? To have the experience. What's going to happen between home plate and first base between that and second, so on and so forth. It becomes the drama of it. can I do it with ease? And just when you get the ease down, all of a sudden, more drama comes in. It's not as easy, and all of a sudden you come back and you're rounding third, and you step at home and you jump up and down and go back to the dugout. But you can't wait to get up again. And this is it. So why do we come here from the soul experience? To experience this density and restrictions, if you will, in this game. Again, why would a Navy SEAL join the Navy SEALs? Like, why even join them, any of that? Because we want to see how strong we are in the most tense position at all. Like, how small of a box can I get in and survive it? This is why we do that. And then we learn, okay, this doesn't work with my character, but that does. But it doesn't mean it won't work with somebody else's character. That's why we have to be careful about spelling out the ABCs for people. It's, how does it feel for you? Yeah, it's working. Well, I do it this way. I'm like, well, why isn't this way working for you? I'm like, because our souls are pointing out different things for different experiences, right? Now, if I try to do your way and I get injured, it's like, okay, it's not but your way isn't wrong. My right way doesn't negate your wrong way. But at the soul level, everything just is. But we came here to experience pain and suffering. But how do we ease up the pain and suffering? How do we become like a professional baseball player and make it easy? How do we do that? Main focus and concentration. The greatest, players are highly focused and concentrated on the moment. They're not, they're not thinking about what they're going to do this weekend after the game. They're in the game. When they step up to the plate, that's the only thing. That's why they do these tapping the foot, and they do all these things to get themselves into the state of a batter. Then they're in the state of a runner, and then they're in the state of someone sliding. There's different multiple states that are happening in the moment in which they're playing the game. It's how do I stay there, connected? But once I start to worry, am I going to make it? I'm like, well, that's starting to slow you down. But okay, it's part of the game as well, and that's the brilliance of it.
That is the brilliance of it. I like that he talks about the authenticity side of things, because oftentimes when you say like your authentic power, we kind of misinterpret what it means, or what that word authentic means. And when he talks about it being an alignment of the personality with the soul, it's like a true meaning of when experience, which he called, illusion in a past, lines up with a sensation in an experience. So, I mean, it's kind of like the alignment of personality with the soul is you begin to kind of fall into your true persona, if you will, or you begin to recognize that you've had personas that your entire life, and these personas were something that you were identifying with. And you were getting lost in the illusion by identifying with these personas. And so it's kind of like taking a step back from those personas, witnessing, being aware of the personas, and you now take a totally different path. But you still will experience these experiences through a persona. Does that make sense?
It does. And it reflects back to what Oprah said about, like, she had this particular book in her hand that was a new copy. And she says, I have a couple of highlighted places here, but if you look at the one at my nightstand, it's earmarked all over the place. So then she said, why earmark it? Because keep reading a book, so to speak, until every page is earmarked. Because the earmark is representing, I understand it, I get it, So if I'm reading a book for the first time, I might only earmark chapter over here and chapter over here, and then the rest of the book is just kind of intermittent, getting me from here to there. And all of a sudden I go back and read again. I'm earmarking, okay, there's more. Oh my God. Because at every different level of experience, as I read it, there's a new earmark to be had. So once the book is completely earmarked, then go read it again. And then it never ends. That's the brilliance of it. And that's what you're talking about. It never ends, because every experience I have then opens up to a whole nother thing. I'm like, and then you get to the point where I'm like, I don't really understand what's happening, but I know the universe has got my back. That's a new understanding now. And the more I earmark that book, the more I trust that every time I pick up this book, I'm going to find something new. every time, like I go to these cutting classes at least once a month, and there are all these celebrity hairstylists, and it's pretty neat because the scissor company I use, they offer this for free for life.
Oh, that's cool.
And so you get all these celebrity hairstylists. It's really cool because it's pretty intimate. There's about maybe 10 to no more than 20 people sitting there, and so and they'll even say, I learned just from teaching every single time, and they're seemingly at the height of their profession. And it's true. It's like if I go and watch something, and I've been doing it for a very long time, but I still pick up things, nuances and stuff that I never would have. So I go there with open mind now, like, okay, what are they going to teach me today? I'm like, I have no idea. Maybe I'll just meet a friend. Who knows? And all of a sudden, every single time, I never looked at it that way. And it's the brilliance of it. It's never over. So I keep reading that book in the area. Like if you're a financial wizard, are you going to stop studying finances? Hell no. Because every time you get to a new wizardry, it's another way of looking at it, and then you naturally want to express it to other people. It's just a natural byproduct of learning something. But what are we passing back? The theme keeps saying, trust the universe. See what unfolds. Not, it must unfold this way. In order for it to unfold this way, you must do this. No. You may be doing that. You might cross a road where somebody else is crossing a road, and that's only a moment, and you could see the correlation, what you do. But it's way deeper than that, because we all have our own paths. Every ray of sun leaves the sun blasting out that way, but they start here and they go there. So there is a continuity, but what each sun ray is hitting as an experience on the planet, so to speak, and even beyond the planet as going into the solar system, has this completely different experience, each sun ray. So why wouldn't we? But yet we can get together with the sun rays on the weekend and say, hey, what was your sun ray week, What were you shining on? It's like, oh, fucking clouds got all over the place, and I need a shot, It's like, it's kind of interesting when we look at it from a different level. And
I think a lot of it too comes down to like we've had the blind leading the blind for so many years. This.
Did I ever tell you that story?
What?
It is the funniest thing. Karen almost hit me. We're at a restaurant in Phoenix. I think it was like Scottsdale, Phoenix area. It was called the Vig.
Okay. Yeah. That place is great.
I think it was on is it Indian School in 44th?
Yeah.
So we're sitting. Yeah, we're sitting at the bar, and. I could never, like, I'm just sitting there and Karen's sitting here, so I tilted towards her to stare at her, when I'm talking. And as, like, over her, it would have been her right shoulder, were two people walking, looked like they seemed to come to the bathroom. And it was two blind people.
Okay.
One held the stick and the other one was holding her arm. I'm like, hey, here's the blind leading the blind. Karen's like, they could fucking hear you. I'm like, I'm sure they would laugh too. I'm like, who's the blind?
I'm sure they would laugh too. Right. Hey, this is what's going on every day in our media.
Yeah, no, it was just the funniest thing. I'm like, hey, it's the blind leading the blind.
Was it actually that?
No, really, it was two blind people.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, and the one blind, because I realized the one had the walking stick to indicate anything, and the other one was holding onto the shoulder.
Yeah, on the
and I'm
shoulder.
like, oh, that person's blind too.
Oh my god!
It's the first time in history I've ever seen the blind lead the blind. To me, it was always theoretical.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
Kara got upset at me. I'm like, hey, there's the blind leading the blind. She goes, their hearing is really good.
I was just gonna say. They're all other sensory experiences.
I'm sure they were laughing. Yeah, I wasn't trying to be cruel. I'm just, it's like, hey.
That is really funny, though. That is a good little story. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of how this experience work is. We get handed down these like weird ideas, about the way things are from a very early age from people who, had just their physical experience of something. This is why we have like racism and all these things that, some guy had an experience and his experience wasn't the way he liked it. So he shared it with his grandson that these people are bad, or this and that, or the same thing with like rich and the poor. This poor person has this horrible interaction with this rich man who takes advantage of them or whatever. And now forever, the experience I'm passing on to my family and my offspring is the rich are bad, you know, and all this. And so we've like kind of hoodwinked ourselves in this weird way where it's like we've never actually explained the truth, the absolute truth to the people, you know, to the masses, and giving them the chance to say, oh, I see this from a certain way. We just kind of straight started getting indoctrinated, you know, from an early age about the way things are.
And that's where the beautiful phrase came from. Wait a minute. Like the understanding of wait a minute means there's something else going on. So that's how these phrases came, like, because you were taught something and then, but the universe, like, okay, I'm like, the empirical truth always has to shine. And then you're like, you were told something and this is how it works. And they're like, wait a minute, it's not really how it works. And that's, wait a minute, almost has a character of comical. I look at it as comical relief to it. Like I try to look at everything. I don't force myself to look at things funny. I just see the humor and stuff.
Well, like, but I also look at it like from like practical types of ways too, like in like the everyday uses, like, you know, like money, for example. You know, they're always telling us, oh, if you want to get ahead or make money, you got to save money. And it's like, wait a minute. Hold on, with inflation.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
With inflation and how this works, it doesn't matter how much I save because then the money actually becomes just worth less and has less buying power. And you're like, so the trick really isn't
one perspective.
To save things. Well, you know, and you start to just look at the way you were taught about like everything.
But then somebody else comes along and says, hey, I make a lot of money in inflation. How do I do that? I put my money embedded against this. And I put it in this direction. So, you know, like they said, the Fortune 500 companies, 500% of them, or 50% of the Fortune 500 companies make their money in a bear market. And then the other, well, then what's better, is bear or bull? I'm like, well, it's 50-50. So if the statistics right, I'm just reading off of what I heard.
Yeah.
But it, like I said, it doesn't really matter. I'm like, if it starts to make you feel bad, then I'm on the wrong side of the
narrative.
seesaw. I'm like, no, you're not. You're on the right side. It's just that they're spreading a narrative, and not that it's false. It's just that their viewpoint is from that. They're just explaining their side of the seesaw, where there has to be an opposing side as well. Where I'm saying, go into the teeter part of it, and then to have fun, you have to choose a side. Like again, to have experience, you choose a side. Just like the game of baseball. I'm like, the goal if the goal is to make it home, why leave? I'm like, well, there's no game then. There's no experience. It's for the experience. And then we learn how to acquiesce the experience, and I can get better at it by like, okay, that didn't work. You know, based on the rules of the game anyway. And that's all it is.
Yeah.
It's all it is, you know.
I just find it kind of funny, you know, the way that we have our experiences and how they're shaped, you know, and I watch as these experiences were shaped, you know, decades ago and, you know, or generations ago, and I watch it as they've carried out, and it's like, wow, you know, you can then take a step back and say, what else was I unaware of? What other possibilities are out there that
everything.
And that's where life starts.
Yep.
Is you start going, okay, you know, and I remember this with me, like it started with like few things, like seeing the way money worked, you know, seeing the way, you know, media worked, seeing the way, you know, all this stuff, and you start going, wow, pretty much, you know, everything I've been taught is just one way to look at it.
That's it, and everything continuously changes. So
yeah,
so knowing that,
but this gives you your power back.
Yeah, but how you and keep in mind, because everything happening at once, if you try to figure it out, will completely overwhelm you, and anxiety will be part of you. Then you turn into depression. It's like, how do I do that? I'm like, stay present. What are you dealing with now? All right,
that's your number one
that's
teacher.
And
at
then,
that moment.
Then if you trust the universe is working in your favor, it will present an idea or a concept for you to act on. Yeah, the action is the fulfillment of the birth of the child. Otherwise, it's stillborn.
And there's no wrong action, too. That's another thing.
No, there is action that is interfering, and then there's action that's congruent. So obviously, the interfering will show you it didn't work.
People are just very afraid to take any type of action because they're afraid it's going to be the wrong action.
Yeah, and that unto itself is an action.
Yeah.
Non-action is still action. So why not move in that direction? And when you do, it's kind of, when you stay present, every action you'll take will be the next logical step. But thinking about something way beyond your experience, say like, if you say you just started hiking, you just started hiking like a month ago, and I just hiked 2 miles. It was really cool. And then you put on the TV and you see someone on Mount Everest. I'm like, damn. All of a sudden, like, now you're trying to picture yourself how you felt after a 2-mile hike. And it was, I don't know, say it was like 40 degrees out and it was kind of chilly. And now you're like, damn, like Mount Everest. Because like everyone's, even if you've never hiked, you walk. So this is why we can know, like, what is it like for them to do that? Well, you got to understand, the people that are hiking, that isn't their first, or climb Mount Everest. I'm assuming it's not their first mountain they ever climbed in cold weather. It was the next logical step for them to a degree. So when you look at that, like, some people can go from A to Z quicker than some other people. It doesn't make it better. Some people need to go to A to B to C to D, so on and so forth, where some people go A to F and quickly, like, like the Mozarts of the world. And, but nonetheless, everyone could get to this place, but it's not getting to the place. It's in the present moment that's shifting the ice into steam, is experiencing it, going from ice to steam,
and accepting that.
Why we're here. You're like, oh, it's interesting. Yeah.
And being okay with that.
Yeah, and when you're okay with it, you utilize it into your field. So like, it's nice. It feels good with steam, and then I like the opposite effect of the ice. Yeah, and submerge myself in it. So so you are acting in it. It's not just conceptual or talking about it. I'm like, it's cool. But if everything was always ice, if everything was always steam, and now you had to choose one or the other, I'm like, that's the problem, not it. And then the lack of choice of choosing. But we never have a lack of choice. That's the funny thing. It's a concept of a lack of choice. A lack of choice is abundance of lack of choice. An abundant amount of lack.
It's funny how we do that.
Yeah, and that's so when you start to contemplate these things.
But we don't. We do that with multiple, things.
Yeah, but
the abundance of lack is something that most of us struggle with.
Yeah.
It's not that you don't have any abundance. It's just you have an abundance of lack. You are constantly putting your intent, your attention, your focus on all of this lack, and so you're surprised when you get an abundance of lack.
Yeah, so there is no. So you say that there really isn't anything such as lack. This is abundant of stuff that you don't prefer. And it's like, holy shit! It's almost like Bashar says this a lot, and that's where you start to contemplate these concepts. But doubt is 100% trust in something you don't want to experience.
Yeah, right.
So there is no such thing as actual doubt. There's always trust in something. I'm either trusting it's not going to work out, so I don't take the physical step. I don't take the action in order to see where it's going to take me. I just don't do that. But yet I wanted to do it, and then as time goes on, I presume failed, and then have excuses to why. I'm like, well, I couldn't do this because of that. I'm like, no, you're just conjuring up thoughts for not taking the action in the direction in which you want to go. The beautiful thing is the universe never gives up on you. Just like your GPS. I can draw, if I was trying to get to San Diego from here, I have to make my way west on either I-8 or I-10. I would have to shift back down, but that doesn't matter. But if I ended up getting onto I-10 and heading east for a very long time, where the point I saw a sign that says Jacksonville, Florida, my GPS is still trying to get me to San Diego. Yeah, it is. It's, I just now have to listen to it. That was the problem, is I wasn't listening to it. Every time it said to make a U-turn, I just slow it in like this thing's out of its mind.
And this internal guidance system is very much what Gary's talking about.
Oh, it is everything.
Yep. Which is, hey, this is a non-physical, a non-sensory experience, but it's like this sense of knowing. Every one of us has had experiences like this in our lifetime, one way or the other. Just something in you is like, I shouldn't do this, or I don't want to do this, or something stops you or holds you back from it. This is that internal guidance system. This is that intuition, is what Gary calls it, and we all have intuition. It's just learning to listen to it.
Yep.
And that's not something that we, as a 5-sensory, human experience in a concrete third-dimensional reality, have put much attention on or shined a lot of focus on, because it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
There's no way to capture it, if you will, and say A plus B equals C, and that's been a challenge.
Yeah, and like think about this. Like before the telephone was even invented, like when it was invented, like how can I pick up this device that had a little ear device and then a little microphone in it, and then talk to someone that I know might be 3,000 miles away in how I understand spatial awareness of distance. Where before I had to be with, like, if my wife is across the room, I have to yell, but if she's close by, I can whisper, right? So how can I keep a whisper on the phone and someone 3,000 miles away can hear me? Now think about this, like okay, the vibration's going to the phone. I'm like, but how long does the vibration last? Like how far is this telephone cord all the way? Like this rope is all the way, because remember, you kid, you took the rope in the cup and you went across the room. Yeah. So you do that, it vibrates. Okay, now let's take that away and let's make the cell phone. Like what? Like how do you explain that? Well, the frequency impacts the information that's going through all the way to. I'm like, okay,
airwaves.
Yeah, it still blows my mind. But at a higher level, I know it works.
Well, we know it works, but I mean, let's say tomorrow some, catastrophic event happens and, phones are down or whatever, and there's only 10 people left. Well, unless any one of you is an engineer or something like that, how are you going to recreate a phone? You know it exists. You know this technology is there. You've used it.
But then you might say to yourself, let's not, because the reason we're here is because of the cell phone. And then we start a new religion on anti-phones.
Yeah. No phones.
No phones.
Well, and that's just another experience.
Isn't that funny how, like, a lot of the movies are starting to come out now with these apocalyptic, like there's another Mad Max coming out.
Oh, really?
Or it's out, I think. And you're starting to see all these things, like these scenarios. Like before it was like another country bombing us. So there's always these scenarios that are trying to eliminate us. Like, and if this went down, this is how we would act. And I'm like, we could choose to act any way we want, But the thing is, people are like, what do you think about that? I'm like, I don't. Because right now my cell phone works. The people around me are loving. Some of them are annoying, but that's just I have to work on that. I have to earmark that book or that page, I should say. Like if they're annoying me, that's on me. So I have to keep reading that page over and over until I finally get it, But yeah, I'm like, I don't play it. If that was to happen, the universe will figure it out for me. Exactly. And I'll follow it. Unless fear comes in, fear is drowning out the internal guidance system. That's what fear is. It's drowning out internal guidance system. The internal guidance system's always there. It was like, I remember I called my Uncle Joey up not that long ago. Yeah. And he picks up the phone and he is blasting in the background. I'm like, Uncle Joey's, who is this? God damn it, I can't find the remote. He's like screaming because the TV was on so fucking loud. He couldn't hear me. And Uncle Joey's like, what the fuck? I'll call you later. Boom. And he hangs up on me because the connection wasn't bad. It was just his TV was so goddamn loud and he couldn't find the remote. It was the funniest exchange.
That is funny.
I've had in a long time. And I'm like, this is brilliant.
Yep.
Yeah. So I text him now. I'm like, do you have your remote? I'm about to call.
Can I give you a call? But that's kind of how we navigate life, Yeah. We run into situations. We've got to experience them. At the end of the day, it's like, all right, what's next? Anything that comes your way, you have the ability to hang, and that's what I kind of remind myself as I go into new situations and circumstances and experiences every day is, all right, I trust myself. Yeah, I can go into this situation, whatever comes at me. A, it's for my evolution. It's here to help me grow, and B, there's nothing that I can't get through or accomplish, or it's like when you trust yourself and you know that there's like this like deep knowing where it's like, all right, I'm gonna figure this out. It's gonna work its way out.
Yeah, it's almost like getting to the point where I trust every time my foot leaves the earth and steps down that it will support it.
Yeah,
Like this is the work right now. Getting to the place where you know the universe will support it, but you're still like questioning it. It's like, okay, if I questioned every time I step, the earth would not meet, my foot would not meet the earth. I'm like, I'm gonna be standing still a lot.
Yep.
You know, I have to examine and measure. I'm like, it's almost like going out on ice. You know, we had a reservoir right near my house, and there were some winters where it would get really cold, but there was some weren't. But we still wanted to play ice hockey, and then we'd always take the lightest guy and go walk out on the ice, you know, because he was the lightest one, right? And it's like, and okay, go. And if you heard cracking, we're like, get on your stomach, right? And it was funny. Thank God I wasn't the lightest guy, because I would not want to be the one to go out there.
testing.
Hey, Johnny, it's your turn.
Ah, shit.
Yeah. So you go out there, but then there were like winters where you're like, you didn't have to test it. That thing was like 2 foot, 3 foot thick. And we're out like in the middle playing.
And you knew it.
Yeah, and just hoping like it didn't start getting warm as we were out there. But it's kind of like we're walking on ice, not on the solid ground. Can we get to the place where we're walking on solid ground? And the answer is absolutely yes. It's just, again, when you're going out on ice, you want to test it, right? But once you test it and realize it's solid, you forgot that you're going to fall through, and then you enjoy the ice skating. So yeah, you might have to go through that where you're poking at it and touching it and doing that. But it'll get to a point where you trust it so much that you're not going to fall through. And then a whole new level opens up. And then it levels up, and there's always something new. There's always another figurative sheet of ice to deal with.
Exactly.
There really always is.
I forgot the saying, but it's like something like the bird is not afraid of the branch breaking when it lands because it has, its confidence in its wings.
Yeah, unless it has its nest in it.
But that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Hey,
that's a perfect analogy.
When I land, whatever gets thrown my way, I trust in knowing how I can respond and react.
Yep. Bless you.
Excuse me.
There you go.
I trust and know how I'm going to respond and react. Will allow me to not only get through this, but learn, grow, and have a great experience from this experience.
Yeah, and try not to anticipate how you're going to act either in a situation, because people always have these scenario things like, if this would happen, what would you do? I'm like, the honest answer is I don't know. I try to act as least hysterical as I possibly can, or as cool as I possibly can, right? But I don't really know. I've never been there in the way people lay out scenarios. If you lay out a scenario how I to do this, I'm like, well, I've done that already, so I can allow you to know that. But life is every day. It's like, there seems to be this nice moving continuity in life, but every once in a while you get these sharp blimps where this is not a regular day. But historically, in most people's lives, you don't see life acting that erratic. You don't. But there are these erratic moments, and these are usually the moments that define us, right? Like the death of someone doesn't happen every day, but when it does happen, it's like, wow. It stops everything, and you start to rethink everything. You can go darker or you can go lighter. What I mean is life is kind of shitty, and then someone dies. I'm like, I told you life was shitty. There's no goddamn God. Or the reverse can happen, and then everything in between can happen. We don't know. And, for me, having those experiences, I've learned you have to let go. And in the aspect of letting go, you find yourself rising, not falling. I always thought things held me up. Things held me down, in a sense. I'm like, wow, it's interesting. I let go, and all of a sudden I rise. I'm like, oh my God, I'm lighter. And if you truly become who you are, there is no baggage. It's light. But it again, make sure you don't need that suitcase or that backpack, and then walk around with it, and you realize, I don't really need this. And then get rid of it.
I'm going to be just fine.
Yeah, get rid of it. We're not here to say get rid of everything, because that could create tremendous fear. And then your luggage gets even heavier. Now you're going to buy like metal luggage. and you're gonna shackle it to your body so you can't even get rid of it, right? I'm like, oh no, I'm not. I don't want to even let go, so I'm gonna handcuff it to my wrist to where I don't even have the choice. I'm like, no.
No, that's how the mind works.
Yeah, it can work that way. Yeah.
You know, it's our goal with this, episode and with Gary is to show you that, you become aware of this. You put awareness on this, and when these moments come up, you won't feel the need to shackle yourself, to your steel luggage, if you will.
Yeah, so check out Gary's information. He's got a lot out there on YouTube and other sources. His books are really good.
He also has a website too, seedofthesoul.com.
Yeah.
Yep. So you can find some good information there. He's got a YouTube channel. Check out his YouTube channel. And then there's a bunch of good stuff like this video with Oprah and stuff. You can find a lot of good content on him. And I think also when I was researching him, I think he does weekly Zoom meetings on his website.
Nice.
Like he's still interacting with people, still sharing this information. So if he resonated with you, get online, take a look at his stuff, and you can still get involved with him to this day.
Yeah, and see what part of this resonance works in your life, and then contemplate it and make it your own. Like when he's sharing information, the information he's sharing isn't his. It's the experience he's coming through that he's resonating. But this information's been here since what we think as the beginning of time. Just like ice and steam are always here. Which focus am I focusing on?
Yep.
Where do I, and that's kind of how it is. And so the accolades of allowing the information to come through him is what we should hold to. But we're no less or greater than, he'll be the first to say that, than anyone else. It's just we're going through these experiences. Why run to first base if home is the result? I'm like, because it's fun.
Part of the experience.
Being tagged out isn't necessarily fun, but where would the joy be if the possibility was never being tagged out, right? Like literally, if every kid got up and like they had a home run, how long would that game last?
It'd get pretty boring quick.
Yeah. So I have to really, really, really focus, on my crafts in order to play the game. And as these skills get better over time, the game becomes more intricate, and all of a sudden more delightful. Possibilities getting tagged out is still there. A good baseball player still hits, is still 70% deficient, right? Because 300s are really good. You're starting at 1,000 at the beginning of the season, and if you're at 300 or just above, you're a really good player. I'm like, wow. Like I wish wish I played. I wish my teachers graded like baseball.
Like baseballs. Talk about a curve.
Frank got a 35 on the test. Hell yeah, I'm MVP, baby.
Oh my god, I love it.
But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
That is seriously awesome.
It's funny. That's why I like baseball better than school.
I like the average.
Yeah, it was so much easier.
Oh god, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mr. Dan Murphy again. Thank you so much for the recommendation on Gary Zukav. We appreciate it, and we'll see you guys all next week.
Yeah, and again, anyone else has any other people that we'd like to cover, or concepts, even if it's concepts, me and Mike will jump into it, give our perspective in it. And again, it's just our perspective in it. But if you have something in mind, just email us at perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com, and we will respond to you.
That sounds great. We will see you guys next week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate you.
Much love and peace out.
Thanks, guys.